Alright, good afternoon. Here's our video on how to solve for a side length given some trig information. So we're going to use our trig ratios. We're going to use sine, which is opposite over hypotenuse, or cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse, or we could use our tangent, which is opposite over adjacent. So we're going to use one of those three ratios to solve for x. And how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing we need to identify is where's our reference point? Where's our angle? It's at 29 degrees. So we're going to look, everything's going to come from that angle. And let's label our sides first. So I've got the opposite side is 12. That's opposite across from my angle. The hypotenuse is across from the right angle, so that would be x, which makes this side the adjacent side. So what do I have? I have the opposite, and I have the hypotenuse. So the opposite and the hypotenuse, that would be our sine. So I'm going to use sine of 29. This is what it would look like on your calculator. Sine of 29. You know that reads sine, not sin, but sine of 29. Over 1, sine of 29 equals what? Well, it's opposite over hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse is x. And I typically write these as a proportion. Sine of 29 over 1 equals 12 over x, just because then it's a little bit easier for some students to see how you could solve this. If there's no denominator on that side, it's a little bit more difficult, still doable, but just something that I like to do. Then if we cross multiply, it's sine of 29 times x equals 12 times 1, or just 12. And then what I need to do to get x by itself is I need to divide by the sine of 29. Because it's multiplied by x, so I'll do the opposite. Divide by sine of 29 on both sides. And sine of 29 is just some number, right? It's just some decimal. So what I would do there is I would take x equals 12 divided by the sine of 29. So 12 divided by sine of 29. Make sure you're in degree mode on your calculator. And you should get a final answer of x equals 24.752, or 24.8. All right, let's try two more. So now I've got my angle is 58. All right, 22 looks like it's going to be the opposite. It's across from 58. This is my hypotenuse. I do not have the hypotenuse. I have the adjacent. So I have the adjacent and the opposite. And if you look up above, you'd see that I'd be using tangent for the adjacent and the opposite sides. So I would say, all right, the tangent of 58 equals what? It equals the opposite, which is 22, over the adjacent, which is x. So I'll put this over 1, set it up kind of like a proportion. And then if we cross multiply, tangent of 58 times x, which is just some number, some decimal, equals 22. All right, so what do you do then? Well, you've got to divide by the tangent of 58 on both sides to get the x by itself. So really what you have here is x equals 22 divided by the tangent of 58. So if I type that into a calculator, 22 divided by tangent of 58, make sure you're in degree mode, and x would be 13.75, or 13.8 if you're rounding to the nearest tenth. All right, our last one here, I'll leave our trig ratios up at the top. See if you can solve this one. I would pause the video and then unpause to check your work. All right, so you've got your adjacent side, your hypotenuse, adjacent and hypotenuse up at the top of the screen here. You would see that adjacent hypotenuse is cosine. So cosine of 37 equals 48 over x. So it would be 48 over cosine 37, which would get you 60.10. So that's how you would do it if you have, or if you end up with the x in the denominator of your fraction. Check out the other videos on how to solve if you do not have x in the denominator. It's one less step. And what would I do if I'm trying to solve for a missing angle measure?